Hey, what's going on, guys? Realm Gaming here, back with another video. Today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at Yasuo for the mid lane. So Yasuo is typically known as one of the more mechanically demanding champions in League. He's got his flashy plays, his insane mobility, and of course, his game-changing ultimate. But with all that power, it does require a good, solid understanding of his passive, his cooldowns, all the itemization he has to be able to reach that maximum potential. So he is one of those high skill floor, high skill ceiling champions. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at some of his abilities. So his passive is Way of the Wanderer. So he also has really bad base stats. So this passive is going to give him a shield so that the more you walk around, this sort of charge starts to build up. And once you get that charge to full, you will get a shield and you can utilize that to trade in lane. So the enemy laner will be constantly trying to poke this off, so just kind of be mindful of that. So your passive can really make or break you in the early game during trades. Now, going into his Q ability, Still Tempest. So what you're going to be doing with this is you're going to be gaining stacks of something called Gathering Storm. Then after 2 stacks of this Gathering Storm, you're going to send out a Whirlwind and it will knock the enemy into the air. Now going into our W, Wind Wall. So Wind Wall will block both auto attacks and projectiles. And this has a very long cooldown, so you do want to be careful with it. And typically you want to use this to kind of zone out the ADC in a team fight, right? So say, for example, the enemy ults in. What you can do is Wind Wall behind where all the tanks are fighting, sort of in the middle, and the enemy ADC can't get any autos in. And typically you can win a lot of team fights just by placing a good Wind Wall. Then we also have our E ability, Sweeping Blade. So this is where Yasuo's mobility all comes in. And this ability will actually do its maximum damage if you dash to 2 enemies before dashing to the champion itself. So before you do dash into an enemy, make sure that you dash to a couple minions first. And the way this will work is you just press E on a minion or an enemy champion. You will dash directly to it, but you cannot re-dash to that same minion for a few seconds. So be careful, because if let's just say there's 1 minion in the lane, you dash to it, then dash to the enemy. You can't dash to that minion to retreat after that. That minion will incur some sort of internal cooldown, and you're gonna have to wait 10 seconds before you can dash to it once again. Then finally, we have our ultimate, Last Breath. So your ultimate can only be used when an enemy is airborne. So that kind of takes us back to our Q ability, Still Tempest, that knocks the enemy into the air. You cannot ultimate them unless they are in the air. So at no point through your own kit can you ever ultimate an enemy unless you hit them with your Q. Now, there are some exceptions with that. There are some other some of your teammates can knock the enemy into the air, and then you could use your ultimate off of that. A good example of this is the iconic Malphite ult. You can go in, ult the enemy, knock them all in the air, then you can ultimate off that. So it's very important before you go into a game to understand which champions on your team can knock the enemies into the air, because you can make a lot of plays just based off them knocking somebody up. Okay, let's talk about the laning phase in early game. So typically Yasuo is more of a lane bully. And this is great, but this does set you up to ganks and falling behind. And one of the things that separates a good Yasuo player from a bad Yasuo player is when they choose to fight in lane. So due to the fact that you can play so aggressively, you can actually draw the enemy jungler into your lane. And if you consistently do that without dying, you're now putting their jungler in a very terrible position, and you're giving your jungler the opportunity to get ahead in lane. And he's also not in other side lanes ganking and killing your allies. So that also gives your other lanes an opportunity to get ahead as well. So your job as Yasuo is to be very annoying in the mid lane, pull that pressure from the enemy jungler to your lane, and not die to it. Now, a lot of people think that they should be roaming a lot with Yasuo, but Yasuo isn't really the best roamer. He doesn't have great mobility without minions to dash to, and he doesn't have a ton of CC either. So for the most part in lane, you do want to be sticking to your mid lane and not kind of going all over the map to the enemy jungle to kill raptors, or to your top lane to try to help him out if he's getting pushed in. Obviously, all that's situational. You can roam if you do see an opportunity there, but for the most part, you want to focus on your lane. Now, in the mid game is where Yasuo really starts to kind of come online, and this is going to be in between the 10 and 15 minute mark, and this is going to be when you start to get into a side lane. And you typically want to lane on the side that the objective is. So if Rift Herald is up, you're going to be pushing top lane. If Dragon is about to come up, then you want to be pushing bot lane. So typically what you want to be doing is pushing the enemy lanes, the side lanes, into their tier 2, then roaming into the enemy's jungle. You're going to be taking their camps and then rotating back, back to top, back to bottom, depends on what's pushing in. But split pushing on Yasuo in the mid game and going forward is how you're going to be getting a very big lead. So that one of the biggest things in this game is have more gold than your enemy opponents. So push a lane in, check out their jungle, clear it if you can, ward their jungle, get vision on the enemy team, and that's going to set you up for the late game. Now going into the late game, typically the game is going to revolve more around Baron than anything else. So when this does kind of come around, you have 4 or 5 items, maybe 5, 6 items. That's kind of when you're in the late game stages, and you should be grouping with your team for the most part. Now when it does come to team fighting, you'll have 2 roles. You'll either be the carry or you will be the peeler. So if somebody on your team is very fed, you will become the peeler. If you are very ahead, then you will become the main carry. If you are the main carry, your job is going to be to survive the fight as long as you possibly can and get as much damage out as you possibly can over the course of the fight. So in this sort of scenario, your job is to keep yourself alive and nobody else. If you do have somebody who's very fed, like your ADC, then what you want to be doing is peeling back for them. And in both scenarios, this is where you want to use your win wall. So if you're the main carry, use the win wall for yourself. If your ADC is the main carry, then you're going to be using your win wall for them. Now you can also take sort of an assassin role on if you can hit your Q and knock the enemy carry up in the air and ult off that. A lot of the times you can just instantly burst enemy carry down if you are decently fed, but that is easier said than done to do. Now looking at some of our runes, we're going to be taking Lethal Tempo. And if you are running Lethal Tempo, you do want to make sure that you are taking Berserker Greaves to pair with them. For a little bit of lane sustain, we'll be running Absorb Life. And then we'll also be running the Legend Alacrity rune. And this is going to be very important because this is going to get your Q cooldown as low as possible. The more Qs, the more opportunities to ult, and overall, the more damage Yasuo will do. And then Cut Down is going to be very good as well. This is really going to help with Yasuo's burst, and a lot of his damage comes into one big window. So Cut Down is just going to increase all that damage that we do in that very short time frame. Then for sustain, we'll be running the Resolve tree as well with Second Wind, and then we will also be running Overgrowth. And then for your bonus runes, you'll be taking Attack Speed, Adaptive Force, and Bonus Health. For your summoners, you'll be running a Flash and Ignite. Your starting items will be Doran's Blade and a single health potion. Your first back will probably be a Berserker's Greaves into a Dagger, Longsword, and Basic Boots. Berserker Greaves are going to be very important to us due to our passive and building up that flow as quickly as we possibly can for more shields. And then your main build is probably going to look something like this. This gives a really good balance between sustained damage, burst damage, and survivability. If the enemy team is a little bit more squishy and you do not need Blade of the Rune King, you can also go the Phantom Dancer build, and you'll be weaving in Plated Steel Caps, Phantom Dancer, and Bloodthirster. Alright guys, that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking, subscribing to the channel. See you on the next one.